Welcome, and happy Monday. We're about to get started. So, welcome to session two, our week two of our 5-week webinar series on managing the impossible, helping managers lead when resources are tight. And right now, with the state of our economy, with everything that's going on, we are definitely in a constrained type of state, and it absolutely filters into our workforce environment. So it puts an extra strain on our managers out there. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive in and take a look at what we've got today for session two. So let me start by introducing myself and sharing a little bit about management cues. So I'm Dr. Mayra Austin. If you haven't met me before, I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Management Cues. And Management Cues is unique in that we provide leadership and management training that really encompasses proven results. So we measure as we train. We've also been scientifically backed, tested, and proven to work. So we can provide a clear result on return on investment for anybody who partners with us. So that's a little bit about us, and I am all too excited to kick off this second week of our webinar series. So let's get into it. So this session is going to be about doing more with less and looking at resourceful planning when tools and time are scarce. Which right now, with the research that we're doing and what we're seeing across our clients, this is definitely relevant and the support is definitely needed. Okay, so let's get into it. So we're going to be looking at the mind shift around scarcity and opportunity. Sometimes we make things difficult for ourselves because of the way that we view them, right? And so I think that it's important to acknowledge that it starts with us. Any sort of efficiency, any sort of impact, any sort of motivation and innovation as managers and leaders, it starts with us. And so having that awareness helps us kind of set the tone and helps us dive into environments that are ultimately designed to produce more, better, and at the same time recognize the human beings within it. We're going to talk about neuroscience and the insight of managers experiencing scarcity because there is an impact from a neuroscience standpoint. So that's uniquely interesting. And we're going to talk about a resource planning framework. So one thing that I've learned in my career is that having a go-to way of doing things helps me feel better about it, helps me step into things with confidence. And I think it does the same thing for others. And so having a default framework that you start with helps you really center on what's important and not be distracted by the noise. So I'm going to give you a framework that you can use today to manage scarcity, to feel confident within scarcity. And then we're going to go through a list of practical tools that you can experiment with, you can test. If they're in your environment already, I recommend that you learn a little bit more about them and how to use them in different ways. And so we'll touch on those. And then at the end, I'll show you the tool that you're going to get for joining us today, and we'll do a little bit of Q&A, and then we'll close out, similar to what we did in week one. Okay, so let's get into it. Okay, so as a baseline at Management Cues, we always start with fundamentals. So let's get an understanding around what it means to be resourceful. So resourcefulness is the ability to find quick, creative, and effective ways to overcome challenges, especially when resources like time, money, and tools are limited. So as somebody who has worked in workforce for over 2 decades, I started in the workforce fairly young. I've come across so many different scenarios. So understanding resourcefulness is important because then you gauge the value of it. So it's a combination of problem solving, which means identifying solutions with what is available. It's adaptability, which is adjusting plans when circumstances change. It's creativity. It's seeing an alternative use for what you have and the skills that are at the table. And that includes your skills and those of your team. Efficiency is maximizing the value of limited resources. So let me give you an example with that. when I do my audits and I'm invited to come into environments and audit for operational excellence or operational efficiency, one thing that comes up almost every single time, like 99.9% of the time, is the tools that we have, we're not maximizing. Either because there's an absence of training, an absence of design, or there was an ineffective implementation of the tool. So there's always an opportunity there, at least from my experience. That's what I've seen as an operations leader. And so resourcefulness, when it comes to management specifically, means achieving objectives despite the constraints, right? No matter what is at the table. Not by waiting for more resources, but by making the most of what's already in hand. Okay, so we're going to start again like we did in session 1 with the mind shift, because again, we could be our best friend or our biggest enemy, and it always starts with us as managers and leaders. So scarcity is an opportunity. So if you have an opportunity mindset, scarcity is not going to get in your way. Okay, so let's dive into that. And as we do that, make sure in chat, I'd love to get a feel for where you're from. So if you could in chat, enter city and state. I'd love to see also if the chat function is available to you. So please enter that in while I go through understanding constraints as drivers of creativity. So creativity is something that is nurtured, right? So seeing it in a way that is working for us as managers and leaders requires this mind shift. So limitations force us to zero in on what really matters. Instead of spreading efforts thin, we concentrate on the essentials. So here's an example. There's a tight deadline, and that helps us or makes us or pushes us to identify the must-have features instead of chasing every possibility. So that's a good thing, not a bad thing, right? So that's kind of shifting it and viewing it in a different way. In the alternative, we might be, if we have a scarcity type of mentality, we might think we don't have enough, right? We don't have enough. We don't have enough time. We don't have enough resources. We cannot make this deadline, instead of narrowing in on how to be more efficient. So that's an example, right? Here's another one for you. Constraints as innovation triggers. So having fewer tools or time pushes to invent new methods. So creativity often is born from necessity, okay? So creativity often emerges when the easy options are no longer available. As humans, we are designed to survive. And so that activates something in us. So here's an example for you. Remote teams that have no budget for software focus on building effective workflows with free shared documents or tools, right? That's us shifting gears. Instead of saying, well, we can't fix this, right? There's nothing that we can do. So it's, again, shifting it. And as leaders and managers, having the insight of presenting it to the team as an innovation trigger changes their mindset about the constraint too. So one more here, constraints as efficiency trainers. So efficiency is something that as managers we build. It's like a muscle, right? And so practicing actually happens the most when you're in a constrained situation. So check this out. They push us to cut waste. They tell us to streamline and simplify. It can feel like a barrier, but the reality is that it's helping us focus in on hidden inefficiencies. It's narrowing the scope. So if you share with your teams that that's what's happening right now versus they're putting all this pressure on us, why don't they do this? Why don't they do that? You've shifted gears. You've also elevated their ability to think more efficiently. So here's the example. A budget cap forces a project team to evaluate vendors more strategically. You start to scrutinize more. That's the reality of it, right? So making that push and knowing that as a leader helps you feel confident within the constraint because you know what mode you're supposed to be dialing into. Here's a constraint as a growth catalyst. So sometimes we feel like because there's a constraint, there's an absence of time, resources, tools, you name it, that there's no opportunity for growth because we are constrained. The reality is that when we're viewing the world in a strategic way, from an enterprise, bigger picture lens, here's what's happening. Working with less builds resilience and adaptability. It encourages skill development and resourcefulness in teams. It forces us to come together better, more efficiently. Here's the example. A short-staffed team cross-trains, expanding skills across the roles. So it's that mentality of, okay, we're constrained, we're going to shift gears and use this as a growth catalyst, right? Even saying that to your team puts them in a different mind frame versus saying, we can't do anything else. There's no more budget. There's nothing else we can add on. We can't give raises, right? That kind of approach is not maximizing the moment. And it's also, it's not going to help when in terms of getting through the constraint to better times, right? So this is how we hinder our own resourcefulness within a period of constraint. So here's a constraint as an equalizer. So everyone faces limits. In business, there's ebbs and flows. That's really natural. And so as managers and leaders, we should always expect there to be ups and downs, good seasons and bad seasons, profitable seasons and unprofitable seasons, right? So, and it affects time, money, tools, but these things also level the playing field at times. So the differentiator becomes ingenuity, not abundance. Like I mentioned at the beginning, we as human beings tend to be really creative and innovative and inventive when there's a need that needs to be met. In times of constraint, it's the same type of situation taking place. So here's an example. A startup competes with big companies by leveraging lean, creative solutions, right? So as a startup organization, I can tell you that we get very creative with what we bring to the table because A, we have no choice, but two, it forces us to focus on what's important. And that's how we came up with the scientifically proven framework, because we needed to compete with the big guys, and we have to stand out in a significant way. So constraints can actually open the door to things. So to summarize the mind shift, in short, constraints shouldn't be viewed as roadblocks, but as creative boundaries that push managers and teams to innovate, simplify, and excel. Okay, so how's that for a change on mindset around constraint? Okay, so now we're going to jump into the neuroscience of it, because a lot of the work that we do at Management Cues is definitely based in science. And the reason we do it this way is, one, we want to make sure we understand the human being within the manager's role. But two, we want to make sure that what we're doing is actually working. We don't want to be the type of organization that just speaks to concept and theory. So there is something that happens to the manager's brain when scarcity is taking place in the environment. So right now, we're in a tumultuous time, right? Costs are going up, there's constraints in the economy. That is going to have an impact in the workforce and on our leaders and managers, right? So we have to acknowledge that there is a human component that gets affected here. So let's take a look at that. So here we go. So here's what actually happens to a manager's brain, right? So what happens to them when scarcity is taking place in the workforce? Well, cognitive load increases. So what does that mean? That means the brain becomes overloaded with problem solving because you're feeling the pressure and the push. Tunnel vision is common when you're feeling that push. So your focus narrows on immediate challenges, overlooking long-term planning. This is a common side effect, right? So our awareness around that helps us mitigate risk around that. Stress hormones, cortisol rises, impacts the emotional regulation and how clearly we make decisions, right? So in chat, let me know, Are you feeling stressed right now? And just say yes, no. And I'm talking about in general in your work environment. You can just say yes or no. You don't have to give details. Um, and when we're stressed, guess what else happens? We experience decision fatigue, right? So decision fatigue means that our decisions become less and less effective. Our small choices feel harder, leading to slower, and our decisions become riskier. So scarcity does definitely have an impact on not only how we view things, but how we physically are experiencing scarcity. And as managers, because we have a responsibility to make decisions, we have a unique response to that effect. So here's the impact on management, which is really important because if we're not aware that that's where it's coming from, we don't typically know how to manage it. So reduced ability to prioritize effectively, greater likelihood of reactive versus strategic choices, strain on team relationships due to stress responses, and innovation may stall when the brain is locked and in survival mode. And make no mistake, as managers, we actually go into survival mode quite often because of the pressure of the decision making, of managing, of dealing with conflict, right? All of those things that are common in a management function or role. So how do we reframe it for managers as managers? One, use micro breaks to reduce stress load. Make it part of the plan, right? And make it strategically tailored into how you work. Apply structured planning tools, which we're going to share some for you to test and play with, to offset tunnel vision. You have to anticipate that tunnel vision is going to happen when you're stressed. It's just how we function as human beings. Leverage the team's collective creativity to reduce individual decision fatigue. That means don't take it all on yourself. Leverage the intelligence and the different lenses in your team to help you come to a conclusion that's objective and that's balanced, right? So in those moments of stress, know and practice leveraging your team. Okay, so now we're going to get into the actual framework that you can use when there's scarcity on the table, when you're feeling that pressure that we're talking about, and when you're stressed, right? So under pressure, having a framework helps you step into things with confidence and not feel like you have to guess or figure it out. That's part of the benefit of having tools in the tool belt, which is what I tell a lot of the managers that have worked with me and that I train, right? Have your tool belt ready for what is common in the workplace. So prioritization under pressure, we're going to start there, okay? With tools on how to prioritize when there's high pressure. So let me know in chat if you have heard of the Pareto Rule, and just give me a yes or no. So let me break it down. This is a great tool to use during scarcity. Okay, great. So we're getting some yeses. Great. So here's how it works, right? You're looking at effort and what's going to equal results. So the Pareto rule is also called the 80-20 rule. It is a principle that suggests that roughly 80% of our outcomes or challenges or problems come from 20% of causes. Okay, so in lived experience, I can tell you that I have seen this operationally, and it is very often true. So it was named after the Italian economist Vilfredo Pareto, who observed that about 80% of Italy's land was owned by 20% of the population. Since then, the principle has been applied broadly in business management and everyday problem solving. So let me know if you knew that it actually came from land and property ownership, because that's where this was born. And so I find that to be really interesting. I'm a little bit of a history buff, so I will share that. But I learned that more recently. I knew the Pareto principle existed, but I didn't know that it was based on property ownership in Italy that it stemmed from. Okay, so let's make it applicable to what we do. All right, let's dive in. So for managers, these are the key points for you to consider and be objective in using the Pareto rule. It's not exact math, okay? It's a guideline, not a strict formula. The focus tool helps us narrow things down. It helps us identify the vital view the vital few factors that create the biggest impact, right? And a lot of the times, bottlenecks are root causes to issues that are causing a lot of the problems in our environment. And that's really what the Pareto Rule is teaching. So here are some examples of that. 80% of sales come from the top 20% of customers. I have experienced that and found that to be true. 80% of problems are caused by 20% of issues. As an operations leader and executive, I have found that to also be true. 80% of your results may come from 20% of your tasks. As somebody who routinely works with managers and loves to see you all succeed, I can tell you I have found that to also be true, at least in my experience and with our clients as we train. Okay, so here's a key thing to keep in mind. For managers, the Pareto Rule is a way to prioritize high impact actions instead of spreading effort evenly across everything. So I can tell you, I've worked with managers for over 2 decades and I appreciate them to no end. I can also say that they spread a lot of effort across the board and don't focus on the things that make the highest impact most of the time because they're just trying to do a good job and cover everything. So let me know if you agree or disagree with that statement. That has been my own experience. I'm always open to the challenge and to a different perspective. But I have found that managers work really hard and they try to spread that hard work across the board versus focus on the top 20% of issues, right? So that's where this becomes how to approach scarcity with a different mindset. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to run you through some examples so you could think about how to apply the Pareto Rule in a practical management way. Okay, so this is going to be specific to management. So example number 1 is going to be on time management. So step 1 could be logging 2 weeks of meetings. Step 2 could be sorting them by the total minutes spent to complete them. Step 3 could be identifying the 3 meetings that recur the most. And step 4 is shortening, combining, or replacing the meetings with asynchronous updates. So asynchronous updates are communication that is shared that does not require everyone to respond right away. So it forces you to frame your mindset on what's the most impactful versus just staying in that mode of having meetings because they're scheduled or because somebody said that they were important or because it's how we do things, right? It's moving away from that and being a little bit more effective. So let's dive into the next example. Here we go. Okay, thank you for participating in chat. It totally makes the experience richer. Thank you so much. So example number 2, use the Pareto Rule thinking of quality. So step 1, tally your customer return reasons or any customer issue. Step 2, identify the top 2 causes that come up. Step 3, fix what is causing those 2 top issues. Step 4, write standard operating procedures or SOPs. And step 5, reassess as needed. So this is an example of using the Pareto Rule in action, in application when it comes to quality, okay? So if you've never seen the Pareto Rule in action from a management perspective, this is what it looks like. So here's another example on sales. So step 1, rank the customer by revenue. This, by the way, I use very often in operations. Step 2, list the top 15 accounts. Step 3, focus on QBRs, which are quarterly business reviews, with those top accounts. And step 4, drive growth by enabling sales to focus on those accounts, right? So what this helps us do is narrow down on what's really bringing in money to the business and learn how to maximize those, right? So that's an example of the Pareto Rule in action. So now that we've covered a little of what it looks like in real life to use the Pareto, move from theory into practice, right? That's what those examples are. And we could use those examples and rework them with whatever scenario you have in your environment. But then we have to look at how do we leverage what we do have, right? So let's walk into that. How do we leverage what we do have? Well, repurposing existing tools and processes. Here are some things that you can do with what you do have, right? So now that we've we've worked through kind of identifying how to make the highest impact using the Pareto Rule. Now let's talk about what it's like when you're repurposing existing tools and processes, working with what you have. So one, identify what you have. Literally take inventory. So take inventory of the tools at your disposal, the systems you're using, and the workflows that are currently in use. You can include both formal tools like software, templates, or reports, or you can include informal things like spreadsheets, checklists, shared drives. Second, assess current use and gaps, right? So at the beginning of our session today, I said one of the things that I run into commonly is that when I go into environments, people are not maximizing the tools that they have, either due to lack of training, poor implementation, or we just wanted to plug a hole, right? And we didn't necessarily vet the use. So you want to ask, are these tools being used to their full potential? And that's a yes or no question. Know if there are any overlapping tools or redundant steps in processes. Identify gaps where a tool or process could do more with slight adjustments. Number 3, match tools to new needs. Look for underutilized features in current tools. So if there's a feature in any software that you have that nobody knows how to use, that's what that's referring to. You're not maximizing the software, right? Repurpose processes for efficiency. So take a look at things like weekly meetings. Take a look at how agendas are written. Take a look at how you're tracking things. Does it really make sense? Simplify and adapt. So combine or streamline steps in processes to save time. Adjust or update templates, reports, checklists, and for new projects instead of creating them from scratch. Eliminate unnecessary approvals or manual work when there's already automation in place. And then test as number 5, test and get feedback. So pilot a repurposed tool to process with a small group. So test it, gather feedback on whether it's easy to use, whether it's clear, or whether it's effective. And I will say this, that asking those 3 questions is really how you want to do it, right? You don't want to use questions like, do you like it? Does it work for you? Be specific. Is it functional, right? So is it easy? Is it clear? Is it effective? Refine before rolling out broadly. And as number 6 says, train and communicate. So show the team how to use the old tool or process for a new purpose and provide quick tips or mini guides that you can use these features for. Reinforce the mindset of reuse first before adding new tools, right? Sometimes we move on to whatever is the shiniest in the world, and we have something that works that just needs to be designed or aligned or updated, right? So it's important to note those things, especially during a time of constraint, and measure the impact. Track the time saved, costs reduced, or improved output. Those 3 things speak to the bottom line. So those 3 things, if you do those 3 things, you can have a competitive edge with leadership, but also you're aligning what you're doing with something that matters. Okay, so that's how you level up. And I've made a career of leveling up quickly. So these are the things that stand out. Share the wins to build buy-in for repurposing or standard practice. So as we look at time management, there's a difference between spending time and being smart about it, right? And managing your time. So micro planning, let me know in chat if you've heard of micro planning before. And again, just yes or no. Feel free to share any scenarios if you want to, but yes or no will be just fine. Micro planning is the process of breaking down. Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing the feedback. Micro planning is the process of breaking down a larger project goal or task into very small, manageable, and actionable steps. So it's almost like you're breaking it all down into little steps. Instead of focusing only on the big picture, micro planning emphasizes bite-sized wins that can be completed in short time and on focused timeframes. So doing this as a manager or a leader helps us feel like progress is happening, right? And so those things matter, especially from a neuroscience perspective. We have learned and studied that when people experience small wins, they actually get chemical combustion in their brain. They start to feel more motivated because they feel like they're winning. So it helps reduce overwhelm, it increases clarity, and it can create consistent progress by turning broad objectives into specific, achievable actions. So we've all been overwhelmed by a big goal, right? But looking at it in components makes things more real, makes it more achievable. And also, once we do it, we feel like we've accomplished something. And that does something in our system. So, micro planning can be very effective during times of constraints when you need to reach a big goal, but resources are constraints and it's difficult to motivate the team. When that's happening, micro planning could be a way to counter that. So how do you do this micro planning? And of course, you're going to get a copy of the deck, so you don't have to memorize any of this. So here's how you do it. You define the bigger goal. So you take a look, you can write it down on a piece of paper, you can type it up however you like. Write down the main project or outcome you need to achieve. An example would be like completing quarterly performance reviews. Okay, and we're going to continue with that example. The second step is breaking it into major milestones, which could be dividing the goal into 3 to 5 big chunks. So, for example, one goal is collecting feedback, one goal is writing a review, the other might be meeting with the employees, and so on. Your third step is slicing those milestones into micro tasks, which is breaking each milestone into even a smaller step. So that they can complete it within 15 to 60 minutes, right? So it's making it very achievable, very doable, super clear and easy. An example of that could be scheduling review meetings, drafting an employee's first review, drafting the second review, and so on. Slicing the milestones into micro tasks, which could be breaking each milestone into those tasks and then giving it a sequence, which is step 4. So the sequence could be putting them in logical order, right? So for example, gathering feedback, drafting reviews, scheduling, and then holding the meetings, right? So breaking it down into components that are not as overwhelming. For step 5, it's assigning time blocks. So scheduling each micro task on your calendar or planner, right? Literally listing these small things out, checking them off. Use short, focused time windows to avoid overwhelming. So when you're doing these things, you want to kind of keep it within 15 to 60 minutes. So it's not like a 4-hour thing that somebody has to do. You want to track progress. And if you could do it visibly on any sort of shared platform where the entire team could see it, that really builds momentum and gets people motivated because you could start to see the progress. So you could see that on a shared Google checklist. You could see that if you use like something like a Kanban board, or even just a simple tracker that everybody can view, or that everybody gets an update at the end of the week, or however you want to do it. But celebrating those small completions, it really does something from a neuroscience perspective in terms of motivation. It actually increases dopamine. So it's really interesting how small wins increase dopamine. But number 7, you adjust as you go. So you get a feel for it. Is it heavy? Is it working? Right? Are people moving along? And then you want to reflect on the wins. So at the end of the day or the week, you want to review what's been completed. You want to build momentum and help have that reduce stress. Progress reduces stress. So being able to create a visual around that and a process around that that's manageable helps everybody, including you as a leader and a manager. Okay, so that's micro planning for you. Okay, so practical tools for doing more with less under pressure. So one thing that I really like doing is equipping managers that work for me or that train with me with what I like to call a tool belt, right? And what tools you put in that belt should make your job easier, should make you more effective, should help you feel better and more confident. So that's what we're going to step into next. Some tools for you to think about. If you're not familiar with these tools, it's okay. I really encourage you to research them. You now have a list. They might help you work easier, right? Work smarter, not harder is how that phrase goes. So Kanban boards you can find in Trello, Jira, and Asana, which are project management softwares. And what that helps with is visual task boards that make it easy to track progress, prioritize work, and avoid bottlenecks. So that's what they help you with. And again, they help reduce stress because they give us higher visibility. Time blocking and calendar discipline is incredibly effective. I started my career in the legal industry, so I had no choice but to be really good at calendaring because if I didn't have a structured calendar, we could lose a legal case. And so the pressure taught me how to discipline my time blocking and calendaring first for attorneys that I was supporting and then for myself. So a structured scheduling method where managers are allocating focused time blocks for critical work reduce wasted energy and distractions. And this includes you blocking out time to think. Your mind is the most powerful tool at your disposal. So if you're not blocking out time to think about strategy, like using the Pareto Rule in your environment, we're actually not getting the most out of you. And so it's important to block out time for that. Collaboration tools and communication tools are also essential, especially in hybrid and remote worlds, which a lot of us now live in. So things like Slack, Microsoft Teams, or Notion help streamline communication, reduce meetings, and keep teams aligned. But I will say this, if we don't know how to use the tool really well and we don't get training around the tool and we're not thinking about how to design it better for our team, we're also not maximizing those tools. And I've seen that happen a lot with Teams and happen a lot with Slack across my clients. So spending a little time there goes a long way because as managers, we have a lot of insight as to what our teams need, how they communicate, what they like, what they dislike. So when we don't use that feedback to design, the business is actually missing out on what that tool can actually do for us. Document and knowledge management. So tools like Confluence, SharePoint, or Notion help organize resources and create libraries that can help us help others, but also understand our business better. So that's another way during constrained times to be able to do that. That's a great use of time and usually highlights areas that we can improve. And then mind mapping and brainstorming tools. So I have the pleasure of working with some great design thinkers out there who are trained at brainstorming, and there is a method to the madness. But you could start by exploring things like Miro, MindMeister, or Lucidchart that support brainstorming and breaking out ideas with teams or even for yourself during a time of constraint to see what's really important. The Pareto Rule, like we just went through, you can actually lay it out visually on some of these mapping and brainstorming tools. And it might really light the way, right? And also highlight areas to be more impactful in. So those are some tools. Let me know in chat which you were familiar with. I'd like to see if you got any new tools. I want to make sure you're getting the most out of this session. Are there any tools that you already knew about? If you could list them in chat, that would be awesome. Okay, let me keep going. And if none, then just say none. These are all new. Okay, the documents one. Okay, great. Okay, we'll keep going and think about it. Continue to contribute as I go through our key takeaways. So these are our key takeaways for today. Prioritize high impact tasks, which means focus your limited time and resources on activities that drive the greatest results. Your time is valuable. It's just as valuable as anybody else's. So you want to treat it with that level of importance, right? Identify what truly moves the needle and tackle those first. And then leverage existing resources. So maximize what you already have. Repurpose tools, streamline processes, and rely on creative solutions instead of waiting for new resources. Microplan. So microplanning was new to a lot of you, which is awesome. You could test it out the next time you're experiencing a constraint. You want to break larger goals into bite-sized, actionable steps. And remember, when we do this for our team, their dopamine increases, which means their excitement, their motivation gets activated because it's easy and it makes it real. It makes progress real. Empower collaboration. So use team strengths strategically, delegate wisely, share knowledge, and lean on collective problem solving. And think about the prompts that I mentioned at the beginning of our session in terms of looking at constraints as opportunities for growth, efficiency, creativity. Teach your teams how to pivot, and you mentally dial into the pivot. Track and adjust continuously. So monitor the outcomes. Is it working? If you use the Pareto rule, did it work for you? Use this to highlight resource constraints, but identify what requires flexibility, and improve on efficiency and results during those times of constraint. Thank you for sharing in chat. I appreciate your participation. So with that said, before I jump into the close, I'll go ahead and open it up for a few seconds. Let me know if you have any questions or comments before I go ahead and close out. Feel free to also share any feedback. So I'll give you guys a few seconds if you have any questions or feedback, and absolutely let me know if this was useful for you.
Excellent, excellent, excellent presentation. Yeah, a lot of good nuggets here. I was expecting someone else to join, one of my clients who talked about resources, so I, guided them towards this, but they didn't show up.
Okay, well, thank you. I really appreciate the feedback. I'm always trying to make it so that it's digestible, but also to see the difference between, different experiences that we have as managers. You'll get a copy and you'll get a link to the recording. Absolutely feel free to share it. You'll also getting a tool that you can share with them as well.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Thank you for joining. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and step into the close, but feel free to message me or put anything in chat. I'm always at your disposal and here to highlight and help you. Okay, so the Pareto Pulse tool. So because I use the Pareto rule quite often in operations and when I'm training managers, I also use it. I'm a business professor as well, so I also use it when I'm teaching in the MBA program. So I think that we miss out on these great concepts when they remain theory, right? So I like to put theory into practice. And so the tool that you're going to be getting this week for registering and attending is going to be this Pareto Pulse tool, which will allow you to just fill in the blanks with whatever issue you have and see if it could highlight that top 20% for you, so that you could be optimal. So you'll get that. It comes with instructions step by step. I think it's 5 or 6 steps. So you'll be able to follow it and you can apply it to any issue or challenge that you have. So that'll be your tool this week. Let me know in chat if you like the tool. Each week for this mini webinar series, you're going to get a tool. So this is the tool for this week. And with that said, I'll close out. So thank you so much for joining. Management Cues is unique, like I said, because we're scientifically proven to work. A lot of what our experts put into our tools come from operations in different areas of management and leadership. So you'll get an access to the session recording. You'll get a copy of the deck. You'll get your awesome new tool, and you also have the ability to access the different programs we offer, access to our hero product, which is our management planner that was designed with the functions of management and leadership in mind. We also give you access to our neuroscience studies, which is our case study that was scientifically proven and why we're different. You can book a consultation with me anytime, free consultation. And we also just rolled out management membership programs that give you access to amazing things. So check those out. They'll be linked in your deck. And next week on the 25th, we're going to have our week 3 or session 3, and it'll start a little bit earlier. So next week it'll be at 9 a.m. And we're going to be focusing on the art of the ask. And this one is really important. It seems to be a challenge for a lot of managers out there and leaders as well. Advocating for what you need without sounding like you're complaining. Yeah, that's a popular one. So I'm excited for that one. That'll be next week. And with that said, I thank you so much. I can't tell you how great the feedback is, and for participating in chat. You make it so much better. So I'll see you next week, and thank you for joining.
Wait, Dr. Austin, Dr.
Yes.
Austin, what
Yes.
was the week 1 topic? And would we have access to that by getting all this other stuff?
Yeah, great question. So on our YouTube channel, we have all of the series. So we have session one and
Okay.
two on there. And if I'm not mistaken, right off the top of my head, I believe session one was the mindset around the constraints on resources, and we focused largely on that. Um, yeah, and I think the tool I believe for that was a kind of an audit tool. So I'd be happy to email those for you. Actually, I might be able to put them in chat right now. Let me see if I can. Give me
Okay.
give me a second. I could probably include the links in there. And thank you for asking. So let me see here. Let me see if I could get lucky and work this out. Here we go. Okay. Okay. There's a playlist on YouTube for this. So definitely check it out. All the episodes will be there under the playlist. So let me see here. Okay. And here we go. Session one. Okay. So here's session one. I'm going to link it in chat for anybody who wants it. And if not, you could always look us up on YouTube at Management Cues. Just search Management Cues and you'll see a lot of our previous webinars. I've included in chat the session one, so you feel free to listen to that. They're great to listen on a drive, and tune in that way. And then I will email you links for registering and attending today, so you'll have access to all of our different resources that are in line with this webinar. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. It's a pleasure. Okay, so I'll see you all next week, hopefully, and reach out to me if you have any questions. You can check us out at www.managementcues.org, and you can check out any of our social channels by searching at Management Cues. Have an amazing week, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.